Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. This is the Cambodian Genocide at about 5 times regular speed. I've already got another version, a 15-minute version up on my YouTube channel, which is about 15 minutes long, and it is fast. This one's a little bit slower at medium speed. Here we go, fast. Okay, we got to do this in a certain amount of time because I got to pick up my kids from elementary school. So we got to go double time, or at least 5 times regular speed. Big ideas. Pause this slide and take a look at this one for yourself. We're going to move on really fast. Other important ideas as we go through this genocide are the economic, political, social, and cultural conditions of the genocide, stability, destabilization, impact of colonialization. In foreign intervention, what are the ethical implications related to the debate about the role of foreign intervention? How was foreign intervention destructive in the case of Cambodia, but also needed in the case of Rwanda? What are the key causes and related causes? Which causes are most significant? So when we're looking at the problems of genocide and the solutions to prevent genocide, we need to consider the problems and the causes accurately in order to get the correct solutions. In this particular genocide, what were the groups and what were the classes involved? Rural, urban, rich versus poor, and other ethnic divisions. In order to create the correct solutions to prevent genocide, we need to look at the correct problems. So consider what were the problems, what were the causes. Some people blame communism and communist ideology. Some people blame the foreign policy of the USA. Some people blame the escalation of the Cold War and global politics, aka both sides are to blame in the Cold War. Some people blame colonialism and the ideology of colonialism and the ideology of imperialism. And the greed that comes with colonialism and the resource extraction and the creation of all the inequity and destabilization. Some people blame all the foreign interference. Well, some people might blame certain types of foreign interference which they consider to be more destructive. And some people blame the foreign interference specifically of certain nations. For example, some people have blamed Vietnam. However, their arguments well, you be the judge. You decide what you think are the causes and the problems that led up to the genocide. Look at many issues, and of course, there could be some level where there are multiple causes. Which causes still are the most significant in your opinion? And of course, there's also a perspective to be considered from local Cambodians, whereas when we're examining this genocide from a global international perspective outside the country of Cambodia, we're coming at it from an international perspective, not necessarily how the people there would have perceived the story. So we have to consider what are our own perspectives as we're looking at this genocide. Another way of taking a look at the concept of perspective is through media like cinema and DVDs. The filmmaker Angelina Jolie directed a movie called First They Killed My Father, and in this case the director chooses to lower the position of the camera to try to give the perspective of a child living through the genocide, which tries to bring it back to that sort of sense of the individual versus the number and statistics, the individual story of a child's life and their family going through the genocide. Okay, take a moment to pause this slide if you have the time. Pause this slide and then test yourself. Do you know the terms on this slide? All right, pause it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, discuss. Okay, here we go. Okay, communism is a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating for class war, leading to a society which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Socialism, a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole, aka the government, the state. Capitalism, an economic political system in which a country's trade and industry, means production and land are controlled by private owners for profit. Modern capitalism includes the concept that private owners could be shareholders. And for extra enrichment, Google the concept of neo-capitalism, late-stage capitalism, post-capitalism. All right, colonialism. The policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country and occupying it with settlers and or exploiting economically. And the settlers piece could be optional. In this case, Cambodia was colonized by France as well as Vietnam and Laos. But the settlers thing was not a big part of this type of colonialism, but there was a lot of resource extraction as well as taxation. Okay, where there is colonialism, you're more likely to have nationalism, not just where there's colonialism, but empires, where empires exist. Sometimes through the stages of empires, people no longer want to be part of an empire or a colonial power, a colonial empire, and they want to have freedom for their nation to be their own people, a nation state. However, this is a concept that became popular in the 20th century, this idea of a nation state. Anyway, nationalism is a group that has a shared national identity and the desire to work to create, sustain, or improve a nation state with a shared national identity. So, for example, if people in Quebec would like to create Quebec to be its own nation, that would be a type of nationalism. However, nationalism can also be where you want to make your country great again. And then there's another kind that's extreme where it can be violent and lead to genocide, which is obviously intertwined with racism. Okay, Stalinism, a political and economic interpretation of communism as demonstrated by Stalin, which is famous for the lack of human rights. Totalitarianism, a political system in which there are no human rights and the state seeks total authoritarian control, usually power centered on one human leader who's a dictator. There's a few exceptions that don't last very long in history. This could be used as a synonym as authoritarianism. However, totalitarianism would be considered more extreme in severity and micromanagement, torture, and total control of the population. A great example of totalitarianism right now is North Korea, where haircuts, for example, are regulated. McCarthyism and Red Scare are also concepts that you should be aware of to understand the driving forces for the U.S. foreign policy during the time of Cambodia. All right, McCarthyism is a period of intense anti-communist suspicion in the United States characterized by public accusations of disloyalty with little evidence. The term has since become a byname for defamation of character or reputation by means of widely publicized indiscriminate allegations, especially on the basis of substantiated charges. Red Scare, a fear that communist ideology will continue to spread around the world and domestically in our own country, and that this communist ideology is so terrible it can be labeled evil. Although the Red Scare is most famous in the 50s, this idea continued into the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. The idea of communism and the USSR being associated with evil was driven home in the famous speech by President Ronald Reagan in 1983, nicknamed the Empire of Evil speech, or the Evil Empire speech. I grew up going to high school in the 80s, and I definitely encountered people who, at that time, did not like communism with a very strong passion. A passion where they would associate communism with being a very problematic, bad, or evil ideology. At the very least, problematic, that would bring economic suffering and a lack of human rights. Okay, realpolitik. Politics based on practical objectives and effective actions rather than ideals. The term realpolitik was coined by the German writer and politician Ludwig von Rothschild in 1853, and before that another philosopher, Machiavelli, would have also had similar ideas where pragmatics are more important than ideals in terms of getting the effective action accomplished. However, does that mean that the goals of a superpower, for example, the United States, the Soviet Union, or any other superpower, should neglect idealism of freedom and human rights? Okay, before we get too into the readings and the history from the textbook, we need to quickly go over some people. Also, if you understand these people when you're watching the documentaries and movies, documentaries and the movies will make a little bit more sense. Okay, these are the people here. Actually, pause this slide here, quiz yourself, and ask yourself, who do you already know on this list, and who do you need to learn more about? Then pause the PowerPoint or the video on other slides to see information about them, or Google people you need to learn more about. Here we go. Okay, I'm going through this video really fast, which means you can pause on this slide if you had to go over this, but really fast. This leader was a king, became president, prime minister, and various other roles, and was trying to walk a line of neutralism or neutrality between the superpowers, not leaning too much on one side or the other towards the USSR or towards the United States. That did not end well for this leader because there was a revolution to oust them. But pause and read this slide if you need more information. Okay, so as we mentioned, the king was ousted by General Lon Nol, a general supported by the United States of America. Again, pause this slide if you need more information, because I'm going through this really fast. Pol Pot was the leader of the Khmer Rouge. And again, pause this if you need more information. Take a look at Pol Pot on Britannica, and like Ho Chi Minh, he was educated in the French university system. Okay, an interesting piece of information about Khmer Rouge or Douche, depending on how it's pronounced. I don't know if I can pronounce the other name, but let's give it a shot. Kang Kek Yu, let's go with for an attempt at the pronunciation of his name. Anyway, an interesting thing was that he had remorse during his trial. Now, you be the judge to decide whether you think that remorse is real, authentic, or not. You be the judge. You look at the evidence. Feel free to take that on as an enrichment activity to look at the sources. But it's just interesting that many other characters who faced trial for genocide did not have remorse. And so this particular person did express remorse. So that's an interesting piece of information. Okay, you look at the evidence, you be the judge. What do you think? What is the role that Nixon had in this, and how much percentage of the force is the cause of the destabilization of Cambodia, the fault of the United States of America and for their policies of intervening, supporting Lon Nol, eventually bombing and invading Cambodia. You be the judge, you decide, take a look at the evidence and decide what you think, but you should be familiar with Nixon and the evidence that there is about his decisions. Yeah, you be the judge, you form your own opinion about what you think about Henry Kissinger. Was he a hero or villain? You look at the various arguments on all sides of the debate. But you should know his role and his advice. In summary, he did not like communism and did not want it to spread. Okay, here is a source that shows that there were protesters in Cambodia against Kissinger. So from a perspective of some Cambodians, they did not like Kissinger. However, the police did intervene to break up that protest. So what was the point of view and perspective of those police officers? Were they just following orders? Or did they think that the protesters were wrong? You look at the evidence, you decide. Okay, 3 more people that you should take a look at and know about. Of course, there's 4 photographs, and that's because there's a young Ho Chi Minh and an elder Ho Chi Minh. And I put in the contrast so you could see the young Ho Chi Minh dressed in the suit and the tie outfit, as I'm wearing a tie right now. And of course, the tie does lend itself to a feeling of authority in Western culture, a feeling of sophistication perhaps in education. Is it true if I was not wearing the tie? Would you trust me as much as when I am wearing the tie? Same thing here. So Ho Chi Minh was educated in the French university system, and eventually wanted independence for his own country. So that was a whole interesting story to take a look at as the historical context and how the history of Vietnam influenced the history of Cambodia, and of course the history of the whole Cold War and global tension and power struggle around the world all influenced each other. You should know, of course, that the Cold War is a struggle between the superpowers of the Soviet Union, the USSR, and the United States of America, where the Soviet Union has the ideology of communism, which is both an economic and political system, and the USA has the ideology of capitalism, democracy, and perhaps liberalism. Meaning as in that there should be democracy, there should be capitalism, and there should be some level of freedom and human rights. Okay, because I'm going 5 times regular speed, take a look at the last 2 bullet points with me on this one. Pause it if you want to look at them all. Colonialism led to the rise in Cambodian nationalism and resentment against foreign interference. Many Cambodians also want independence from French colonial rule since the Cambodian communists had been advocating for national independence. Cambodians who just wanted their own country could be attracted to the various communist groups, the orthodox communist groups or the more extreme communist groups called the Khmer Rouge. So you should also know that Cambodia was colonized by France, and that had an impact. Okay, if you are not aware, this is the textbook that we're using. This is what the cover looks like, the Holocaust and Other Genocides. And a chapter in this textbook is dedicated to the Cambodian genocide perpetrated by the Khmer Rouge. Okay, we're going to go through this section really fast. Democratic Kampuchea was a prison camp state. Okay, that's an old name for Cambodia. It's 8 million prisoners served most of their time in solitary confinement. 1.7 million inmates were worked, starved, or beaten to death. Significance: this shows that the living conditions were far from pleasant during this time. Okay, pause on any of these slides if you need to. Pause on any of these slides if you need to. You should be familiar with Office S21 and the Santabal prison and the leader who ran this prison. For speed, I'm going fast here. Also pause on the slide. This is what the prison looked like. It was a school that was transformed into a prison for speed. Organization. You should be familiar with the stages of genocide, and organization is one of the stages of genocide. In order to help prevent future genocides, we should be familiar with the ideologies that the powers that be have during genocide. The ideology is very complex. In the case of Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge is an example of an extreme form of communism combined with totalitarianism, influenced by Stalinism, fused with some extreme nationalism and some resentment of foreigners. Along with Stalinist and Maoist models, an underlying theme of political worldview of the Pol Pot group was a concern for national and racial grandiosity. Significance. This ideology is complex. It cannot be simplified into one thing or another. It's very nuanced. So, for example, some group of people might say the cause of the Cambodian genocide was communism. Another group might say it was colonialism. Two different things. Can it be 100% one and 100% the other? Most likely not. Most likely it's much more complex and nuanced than just saying 100% of the cause of the Cambodian genocide is one particular ideology. So colonialism itself wasn't directly a cause, but colonialism would have fueled the resentment of colonialism, which would have then led to nationalism, which would have led to then extreme nationalism and racism, xenophobia, and dislike of foreign influence. So it's a complex domino effect, but that's how somebody might make an argument that colonialism was one of the major causes of the Cambodian genocide. So some of the treasured values in the Khmer Rouge political organization would have included Cambodian race, not individuals, agriculture, and eliminating the rich class. And some of these values could have been argued to be a reaction to the foreign influence of first the French colonial powers and then the United States of America influencing the region, as well as Cambodia. Okay, so the DK ruling body was the standing committee of the Central Committee of the CPK, the leaders with maximum national power and responsibility for the mass murders and genocide about to be perpetrated were based in the capital Phnom Penh and were known as Party Center. At the point, a time where they had already seized power. They did start off in the countryside. Significance. Understanding the power structure might help historians understand the causes and perpetrators in order to convict individuals and prevent future genocide. Historical sources. Take a look at this historical source if you have extra time. Take a look at, use Google to Google this article. 1973 article where Leon Knoll says that he has the support of the United States of America. Here's a quote from this historical New York Times article. President Leon Knoll says the Nixon administration has promised Cambodia resolute support in the future for her fight against communist aggression. So that historical article could be something that you could use to help give evidence to form your own opinions on the issues. What is the problem? What are the causes? What are the solutions to prevent future genocides? Okay. This is a really good example of symbolization in this particular genocide, the blue scarves. There's not a lot of great examples of symbolization as one of the stages of the 10 stages of genocide. So this is a really important example to be aware of. Also, it's likely to be on a test perhaps because it's so significant. The only other example of symbolization I can think of off the top of my head really fast would be the yellow Star of David that the Jews were forced to wear during the Holocaust. All right, so this is a blue scarf that would mark people who are set aside to be eliminated in the Cambodian genocide. Take a look and pause this slide if you've forgotten the definition of symbolization. Stage 2 of the 10 stages of the stages of genocide. International responses are very nuanced and complex during this genocide. The reason why is because of the Cold War and alignment being more important perhaps than preventing genocide for certain political powers. I'm going to be going through this super fast. Pause on any of these slides if you need to. Okay, we're at slide 41 of 49 at 25 minutes in. Okay, and we're getting to the concept called manufacturing consent. Pause here if you are unfamiliar with the concept of manufacturing consent. And I'll get into the significance of this in a minute. Let's first take a look. Noam Chomsky asserts that the media in the United States presents information to promote narratives to manufacture consent of the voters with to agree with U.S. military action and other policies that the government wants people to agree with or be okay with. Manufacturing is characterized by filtering of information, selection of topics and information, bounding of the debate emphasis, and media focus on war atrocities of the enemies of the government rather than the allies, and reducing media focus on the atrocities committed by the allies. Manufacturing consent is could be associated with propaganda. However, it's not about necessarily lying, but trying to find a way around lying. So trying to communicate information and get people on board with a narrative or agenda without the need for lying, ideally. Okay, so here we're getting into something significant that connects this concept called manufacturing consent to the Cambodian genocide. So all genocides are bad. All genocides need to stop. All human life is important and valuable. So let's take a look at this statement here. Noam Chomsky asserts that the media in the United States presents information about the Cambodian genocide when it is convenient to promote the narrative that the communist ideology is evil while ignoring another genocide in East Timor because the genocide in East Timor was perpetrated by Indonesia, an ally of the U.S. during the Cold War. All right, reread that sentence if you need to, but basically there's another genocide happening at the same time in a different place, not far away, still in South Asia, in Indonesia, an island called, or part of an island called East Timor, just north of Australia. And here, Indonesia is an ally of the USA during this epic power struggle of the Cold War, and they are also buying weapons from the United States of America as an ally. And of course, Indonesia is also rich in all kinds of resources, including oil. So the United States has an interest in keeping this as a key ally. But you be the judge, and you see if this is a significant issue. Take a look at Noam Chomsky's article and see if this is an important issue that's being raised or not, in your opinion. Okay, but in a nutshell, all human life is important, and both genocides need immediate attention. Okay, so this is slide 40. If you need to, pause on slide 40 about international responses. This is slide 41. Pause on this slide. Test yourself if you need to. For example, if I ask you, explain manufacturing consent, can you do it? I'll go back a slide now. Without seeing that slide, can you remember what is manufacturing consent? All right. Again, manufacturing consent is the filtering of information, selection of topics, bounding of debate, emphasis, and media focus, not necessarily lying. It's trying to help the citizens of a country agree with the government so that the government is trying to make or manufacture consent, make the citizens agree with the objectives and goals of that country. So if a government wants to declare war on a country, especially a democratic country, they need to help get those citizens in agreement with that idea of going to war. Okay. Anything else we should know about manufacturing consent? It's a term coined by Noam Chomsky. Not everybody agrees with it. It's a debatable issue. Take a look at the evidence and decide if you agree or disagree with it. In connection with Cambodia, you should be familiar with this important concept that there were 2 different genocides going on at the same time, one in East Timor and one in Cambodia, but the one in Cambodia got a lot more media attention in the United States of America. Where the genocide being done by the ally of the United States of America did not get the media attention. All genocides are bad. All genocides need to stop. Both genocides in this case needed the media attention to help raise awareness, to help get people to advocate for the stop of these genocides. All right, take a note to pause on this slide if you are unfamiliar with this. Take a special long look at the bold section here. If a section is bold, it could mean that it's very important to consider and to understand. All right, reread it if you don't understand it. If you really don't understand it, feel free to ask your teacher through either MS Teams chat or email. Okay, there are some videos to watch on manufacturing consent if you were absent when they were played in class. There's one, you can find these on YouTube simply by Googling or searching YouTube for them. This one is about the 5 filters of mass media. I'm not going to play them right now. Going fast through these clips. Here's Kissinger. More information on Kissinger if you need to. Take a look here. Pause this here. More information on Kissinger. Test yourself. Do you know this person? Do you know this term? Here's some people you should know. Pause here and test yourself to see if you know these people, especially Pol Pot and Lon Nol. Actually, all these people are important to know, as well as the ones earlier in the PowerPoint and video. And terms. I should slow down here a little bit because these terms are really important and you may not be familiar with them. ANCAR could be translated to be the organization and effectively meant the name of the communist organization during the time of the Cambodian genocide and the rule of the Khmer Rouge. However, that's not the original meaning of the word ANCAR. It could be translated into multiple other meanings. Okay. Perhaps it could be translated to community group or city. Okay. CPK, Communist Party of Kampuchea. That's the official name of the Khmer Rouge. Full Rights Citizen, a group in which only favorite peasants were admitted. New citizens, those who had lived in the cities. However, new citizens were redesignated deportees, and the Khmer Rouge, Pol Pot's regime that took over Cambodia. Took over Cambodia on the 17th of April, 1975. Okay, so if this is helpful for your studying, feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you kindly. And also, if you find this helpful, feel free to forward this to a friend who needs to study and review. If you have a friend who was absent from class, consider that your friend may feel cared for if you forward this video to your friend. Okay, what else should I mention about this? Also on my YouTube channel, there is a shorter 15-minute version if you want a much faster version. And study. Okay, if you have questions, you can also send questions by email or Teams. And thank you for your time. Thank you.